I am so excited to teach you this song. Let's make some holiday music. This is one of my favorite songs ever, not just for holiday music. Let's sequence Last Christmas by Wham. Fun fact, George Michael wrote this song almost single-handedly using a keyboard, synthesizer, and a drum machine. So essentially, we're a little bit more modern than he is, but we're kind of doing this in the same way. The very first thing you need to do, because I haven't done this for you, is you need to set your tempo for 116 beats per minute. That's the exact tempo of the original. It was not 120. It's very close, but not the same. So make sure that's set to 116 beats per minute. And let's add a drum part here. Oops, that's a bass part. Struggle Bus is leaving the station here. Let's delete this track. Okay, here we go. So we're going to do a drum set track. I'm going to use first the Patterns Beatmaker here because that's the most straightforward. If you're on an iPad, stick with me here because we are going to do this in a second way to make this possible for iPad players. Also, for people that maybe have a passion for wanting to learn how to play the drums. All right, so I have a gripe with Soundtrap here, and that's the way that they set up their Patterns drum machine. Normally, when this is set up, the kick drum is on the top, and then underneath that is snare drum, and underneath that is hi-hat. I hate that. So what I do is I delete everything. I come down to one sound, and I want that sound. And the reason for this, by the way, is because I'm a drummer. Okay, I'm a drum set player at heart. I've been a drum set player for most of my life, for over 30 years, professionally for somewhere around 20 or 25 years. And if you were writing out a drum part, you'd put your hi-hat on the top, a closed hi-hat. Then you'd use your open hi-hat. Then you would add in snare drum, not kick drum, snare drum, and then finally kick drum. And that's all we need for now on this. The kick drum or the bass drum part is very, very simple. And of course, remember these white numbers at the top here are measure numbers. And you can see there are 16 boxes in each of these grids. And you can see that it's also broken up into 4 groups of 4, which is 16th notes. Okay, you can see the beginning of each group there. I'm going to add a bass drum on 1 and 3. Let's make this a 2 measure long groove here. Okay, so 1 and 3 of each of those 2 measures. Then I'm going to add snare drum on 2 and 4. Very, very standard rock groove. Let's do one more interesting thing here in the second measure with our snare drum. On beat 3, let's count 3, E, and. Let's add a snare drum on the and of 3. That's really typical for what George Michael did when he programmed this song. Okay, speaking of typical things, the hi-hat part is built mostly on a closed hi-hat part, and it's 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But the most typical thing that George Michael would do in the pattern for this song, and again, this was written on a drum machine, very, very similar to what we're doing. He would, rather than have it be full straight-on 8th notes throughout the entire measure, he would make the and of 4, or the and of almost any beat, an open hi-hat, and he would precede that with 2 16th notes. So he would go 4 E and. And for example, like in the next measure, he might go 2 E and 4 E and leave the rest of the hi-hat part alone. We will do a closer listen to this song. For now, we're just doing sort of a basic setup here, but check this out. I hope that your heart is saying, that sounds terrible. And the reason it sounds terrible is because it's really just on the wrong sound. I've looked for a couple different drum machine sounds here. I thought long tones sounded good, dubstepper sounded good, but I came back to old school every time. I thought that sounded close to accurate. The bass drum sound is a little tonal. I'm not totally nuts about it, but it's pretty good. I'm going to just make sure that I save my work here so I don't lose everything. And before I do that, I am going to highlight both of these regions. I'm going to go up to my edit menu and I'm going to find merge regions. And you can see that I'll undo that, look. It was 2 separate measures. See how that's not the same? Okay, see if we can just move that back. Great. I'm going to highlight both of these. On my computer, I'm clicking and using the shift key so that they both highlight. Edit and then merge regions. That makes a 2 measure loop. Okay, very, very close to what George Michael did. Of course, saving my work here. And just for the argument here, oops, I accidentally right-clicked. But for the sake of the class, let's make this an 8-measure long loop. Okay, drag that out for 8 measures. All right, so if you're an iPad user, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to replicate this. I'm just going to duplicate my track here for a minute so I have the same sound set up, just so I don't have to go hunting for it. But again, I'm using a drum machine, and it's called Old School. But if you're playing an iPad, and I am actually saying playing an iPad, and by the way, you could do this on the Chromebook because you can see that on the instrument part of this, there are letters here for the keyboard. But I'm going to use the closed hi-hat sound of U and the open hi-hat sound of the number 8, okay, on my keyboard here. But you could just tap on the different regions of the hi-hat in the iPad to make this possible. And again, the pattern is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's basically it. But we're going to make 4 and a feature of this pattern. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Don't worry if it's not super accurate because we'll be able to quantize this and make everything line up. Okay? Watch this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice and easy. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so I've got 2 measures of that hi-hat pattern. That has the potential to be really terrible because, again, I'm playing it in and I'm only human. But if I go to my edit menu and hit quantize, the smallest note that we're using here is a 16th note. Okay, so quantize it to 16th notes. If you look at my regions here, you can see that my second measure is all cracked out. That's not correct. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to loop this out. You can see that right there. Isn't that great? All right, super cool. Another thing that I could have done if I had left the original note there is I could have, or let me rephrase that. I think maybe the best thing to do here is to copy this region with the correct hi-hat part. I'm going to paste it next to it, and then I'm going to merge these regions. Okay, so I've got my entire hi-hat part. Now, if I make that look easy, part of that's because I'm a percussionist. One thing you could do to record that is go down here to the tempo, and you could make it like 90 beats per minute. It would be easier to play in. Like, watch, I'll delete this. All right, here we go. Let's use the instrument. Rewind this to the beginning. It'll be a little bit slower. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So probably, oh, look at this region. It's much more accurate. Not a problem to slow it down. Let's quantize this to 16th notes. That lines everything up. Oh man, that first one, that's bad. I'm going to cheat and go to my piano roll and move this over, but you see that I could have copied and pasted it like I did earlier. Now it feels slow. That's okay. The tempo's quote unquote wrong. Here's a cool feature of this. Okay, we can actually play this in even though the hi-hat part is already programmed. If I hit record again, okay, I'm going to use my bass drum sound on the keyboard, that's A, and my snare drum sound, that's D. I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, just like that. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm just going to hit record, and it's going to layer this on top. 2, 3, 4. Nice and easy. Watch it. Here it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. And look, it added on to my groove. Let's re-quantize that. Again, because the smallest note that we used is a 16th note, it's got to be quantized to 16th notes. Okay, now you're saying still too slow? Well, the beauty of MIDI is we can just come back, hit that up to 116. And isn't that great? So if you're on the iPad, that's a great way to do that. Thanks for sticking with me here. We're going to add the bass a little bit later, so stay tuned.